field, what are the rules and regulations to pick up, as we say, to collect fish involved?
Sorry, guys.
I'm going to talk about it for a little while.
I got a lozenge. Would you like one? All right.
So, in doing so, actually, I have a second presentation here. I'll probably hold on that and ask for an invite. Come back and give you a second presentation, which is on the Black State Reserve, which is why Missouri in particular has so many different kinds of fish. We're up to about 240 species now, depending on how many longs you get. So, in putting together this presentation, if you just want the laws of the state of Missouri or the state of Illinois, what you can collect and how many you can collect, that's probably what you start with. So we don't want to do that. What I think you really need to know is, if you're going to go off on your own, where is it that you can actually go to avoid being arrested for trespass? And what are the water laws and the trespass laws of Missouri and Illinois? So we're going to start with that. And I think you're going to find it very interesting because you're going to see quite a dichotomy in the rules and regulations, not only between Missouri and Illinois, but across the entire United States. So on this first slide, I wanted to begin with where can you collect fishes and what would be your utopia, where you can go anywhere you want to and collect fish. And that's Canada, because in Canada, the streams and natural lakes belong to the Crown. And when you say it belongs to the Crown, that means the streams and the lakes are public. That means as long as you can access those streams and lakes, you can go anywhere on them. You can stand on the bottom, you can get on the bank, and you can collect until cows come home. Not a problem. It's not always that way in the United States. Go figure, right? So the United States laws are quite varied, and we're going to get into the water law, trespass laws of some of these other states. We find that in the United States, some of these states are very lenient, some of them are downright difficult to actually go out and collect. Vermont, for example, is a pretty easy state to go out and collect in because the riparian rights along lakes and streams is often public domain, or in the statutes for the state of Vermont, they can decide at any time that they want to make a stream or a lake public domain. All they have to do is go to the legislature, submit a bill, debate it, and enough people vote on it. Then all of a sudden we have another lake or stream where you can actually access it at any point. In Vermont, the landowners own to what they call a discernible low water mark. So in Vermont, the landowners own the top of the bank, they own the bank down to what they consider the discernible. And you can probably make what discernible means, low water mark. And then underneath the stream, the entire bed is considered property of the state. Which means you can go out there and you can walk in it, and you can collect, you can fish, you can do whatever it is that you want to do. So that's pretty cool in Vermont. Then you have Kansas. Kansas makes a distinction between navigable and non-navigable streams. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about what navigable means because it's really important, especially when it comes to the state of Illinois. For navigable streams in Kansas, a navigable river bed is vested in the state. That means the bed of the river is public ground, the banks of the river is not. As a matter of fact, in Kansas, we've got this really strange dichotomy that if they deem the stream to be non-navigable, then the landowner actually owns the stream bed, and they can keep anyone who wants into that stream, and they can tell them, you need to go home. This is my land, and you can't cross it. The other thing in Kansas is that under their statutes, not only is the bed of the stream private, then anything in the water column all the way to the surface is also owned by that landowner. So essentially in Kansas, the landowner not only just owns the land, they own the water. So that means technically in Kansas, if you want to float a canoe down one of these non-navigable streams like Little Creek, the landowner can come up to you and say, what are you doing here? He said, you need to go home. I own that. And that differs again from a navigable stream. Again, we'll talk more about navigable streams in just a little bit. Well, how about that? So, navigable is a term that was established by the United States government clear back in the early days of the country's history. And basically, they had two tests for determining what was navigable. Early on, it was if you could float a log, like a log that harvested for timber. You've seen the pictures where they rafted large logs down the streams. If that floating log would not hang up, that was considered a navigable stream under United States law back in the 1700s. Later, as we moved away from just floating logs down the river, we began to have larger watercraft go up and down rivers. They used that as the new test for determining what was navigable. So, if you had a paddle boat on the Mississippi River, that was navigable. If you had a boat that you could power up the Kaskaskia River in Illinois, the Kaskaskia River was considered navigable. And what's important when it comes down to what we're talking about in a little bit, is that makes a really big difference about where you can go in Illinois and actually collect without getting run off by a landowner or even have the authorities law come to you and say, what are you doing? So it was the raft regard, the vessel test, and the log test. And two states to each other. In Missouri, we had a very important case in 1954 called Elbert versus Dilcourt. And the Missouri Supreme Court assessed that the landowner controls the right to access the creek from the bank, but any person in the state of Missouri can move upstream or downstream of the water, even if the creek is non-navigable. And the question that I have here for this audience is, anybody got any ideas why you think that is?
Because they vary so much in the seasons?
One response was it varies so much during the seasons. Not quite. Okay, we're getting close. Yeah. He said it's because you can fish. What do you think?
Some landers only have access to the land through
The response was it had to do with potential for access. You're kind of on it, Jim.
To me, the streams were a way of getting around.
I'm sorry?
The streams are effectively the roadways at one point. They were you got from one place to another just by going down historically.
Jim says historically these streams were routes, so that people would get from point A to point B. That is also true. Under the 1954 Missouri Supreme Court ruling, that was not the main criteria. I'll take one more guess and I'll tell you what it is.
No more guesses.
It's because of Ozark streams and the heavy use by landowners and the public to wade in them to go fish. That was it. The Missouri Supreme Court said since the beginning of the time when white settlers came to Missouri, they waded and they fished these rivers, and therefore we need to make that vested in the state. And so under Delaware, that's why they came up with that you can't access the stream without permission, but once you're in the stream, you can move up or you can move down, because my gosh, we've always done that. And so that's how they adopted that law. And so what about Illinois? Illinois was governed by what's called the Rivers, Lakes, and Streams Act 615. I read that last week in preparation for this talk, and boy, is it long and in the morning. But it's an important piece of legislation in Illinois. So we got kind of a busy slide here. I'm sorry for the busyness, but that's what Illinois is all about. Illinois bases their trespass laws based on what they call navigable waters. And so, if a stream is determined to be navigable, and they make their decisions based upon what the stream was like in the 1800s. So if it was navigable, we could put a log raft on this river and you can transport goods up and down these rivers. They considered it to be navigable. And if you are on a navigable river, you have no need to ask permission to be on that river or walk in it. You can go anywhere you want to. You can fish. You can tie up to the bank because it's considered navigable waters, and the navigable waters of the state of Illinois is vested in the public. However, if it's not navigable, then it becomes private property. And reading what I have written down here, so any person taking or attempting to take water line by means of any device with the waters of the public waters has to have consent of the landowner or the tenant, or else they're not going to be able to get out of there. So in Illinois, if it's a non-navigable stream, the only place you're going to be able to collect is, number one, you ask the landowner and say, pretty please, can I get out to the stream and go collect? Or you have to be on state ground, where the state had already purchased that non-navigable section of the stream, and then you can access it and collect. If you want to read all about it, there is the citation rule online, the survey of the Waters Law, but I'm sure you have something to keep you awake. The interesting thing about Illinois is if there is not what they call a dedication, and in other words, the state of Illinois purchases property or otherwise had an easement to allow the public to get to it, then anyone who does not own the land next to it, the land under it, actually has no right to even navigate it under Missouri law, or under Illinois law. That means technically, the way I interpret that is, if you're floating a non-navigable stream in Illinois, the landowner can technically ask you to leave. You can float it. didn't know that until I read that. I was like, well, real, well, I played around with it. So, I'll stop here for just a moment. Is there anything that is confusing about what I've presented so far? Because it's really important to know if you're going to go, just one moment, I'll call on you. If you're going to want to go to some of these states and do some collecting, and I've collected in 36 states, you have to know where you can go and what's legal and what's not to avoid getting in any trouble. Question?
Martin versus Waddle, 1842, did that set the precedent that the wildlife is the people's?
Sure, the wildlife is the people, but the water is not.
Well, I mean, you know, when you're collecting, you know, on the, how does it look like you can say that, I guess it probably has been challenged?
It's not been challenged.
Okay.
Right. Another question back there.
Rivers change.
Yes.
Does Kansas law and Illinois law anticipate that? Who owns the river after it's meandered one way or the other?
Right. That depends on which state you're in. It's not uniform. For example, in Nebraska, if a river migrates and a treated land, let me back up, on the Missouri River in Nebraska, not all streams, and you get a treated land because of the movement of a stream channel, the accreted land, believe it or not, belongs to the state, and that becomes public. But you still have to get there, or it's because it's surrounded by private ground all the way around. So other states, that's not true. In other states, the accreted ground then goes to the adjacent landowner. So it just depends on what state you're in and who's tackled that. One thing I forgot to mention about Kansas is that Kansas is the only state in the United States that made no provisions for portage. In most states, including Missouri, that if you are floating down a stream and you have permission to be there, and you come to an obstruction and you have to get around that obstruction, the law states that you have the right to portage, which means you can pull your canoe out, get up on the bank, which is private property, and immediately put your canoe back in and keep on going. But in Kansas, they didn't address that. They refused to address it because the landowners that goes in Kansas, they just don't want nobody out there, period. And so the lawyers haven't even addressed that in Kansas. So. But most states do allow portage. And the reason I'm even bringing this up is you're saying, geez, Bob, you're talking about canoeing and portage, and I just want to collect fish. The one thing that I do in order to get to places where I want to find species X, Y, or Z is I'll put a canoe in and I'll float down to where I think they are and get out and start collecting. And if you don't have a right to portage, well, you're not going to go very far. Any other questions by anyone? Anything unclear? Okay. Second part of this then, what Steve asked me to provide you with is, what is it that you need to collect fish? If you're not going to go and collect for scientific purposes, which would require a scientific collector's permit, then what is it that you've got to have to go out and collect native fishes? In the state of Missouri, with a valid Missouri fishing license, you can go out and collect 150 crayfish, shrimp, and non-eating fish. And I list what some of those non-eating fish are there in the methods. You can read those. So basically in Missouri, if you have a fishing license, you're allowed to collect bait. And you're allowed to collect, in Missouri, 150 small fish that are classified as bait. And you can reduce them to your possession and you can take them home. If you're a native fish collector and you want to collect some Funulus cyanidus and you want to raise them in your particular aquarium, all you need is a valid fishing license, and if the game warden stops you, you say, it's my bait. Legally, you're okay, you can take it home. One thing Missouri has done this past year is, it allowed younger kids to go out who they're not fishing for the permit, they can use the whole variety of different methods to take all these species that are showing there. So, no, that's pretty cool. And this tier what they consider to be non-eating fish, which probably most of you might not consider interested in capturing anything. The endangered species, of course, are all awful. And you can't collect endangered species. And I'm not going to list those for each of the states, but you can get those lists online. They'll tell you what those endangered species are. Illinois has something similar for endangered species and threatened species. They listed 80 species, not all of them are fish. One thing I wanted to show you here was really funny. They have this thing called injurious aquatic life species. And on all of those, even though they could cause harm to the environment, they say that if you want to, you can immediately return them to the water unharmed from where they were taken. So in other words, if you catch a ravioli and you don't want to take it home, they say just throw it back into the water, despite the fact that it's an injurious fish. So, it means one that will cause harm to the aquatic environment. Injurious would be another word, yeah. I thought that was really funny. And I also, I had to throw this in too, the sport fishers can harvest carp, suckers, buffalo carp, and suckers like pitchforks. So, go Illinois, that pitchfork out.
Jeez.
So, I wondered, the laws are pretty straightforward in Missouri and Illinois. Pretty much if you have that fishing license, you can reduce your possession of those small non-game fishes, and you can take them home and put them in the home aquarium. Is that true everywhere else in the United States? So what I tried to do is I tried to find if they listed which you can actually do in each of these states. So I did find one URL. It's called Is Fishing with Life Bait Legal? Since I couldn't really find a website that would say, you can't take it home, you can't go out and actually save the bait. I made the assumption that if fishing with live bait is illegal, probably saving for these species is illegal. And I've been hearing from other folks, like in NAFA, American Native Fishes Association members, in some of the states out east have been banning the collection of native fishes. So I list some states here where the state has actually determined that you cannot fish with live bait, which means if you're not fishing with live bait, then probably you're also not allowed to actually go out and seine and collect. So I list the states here: Alaska, Idaho, Montana. They only let you fish with dead bait, so you can no collection of live bait there. In Nebraska, basically they let you go ahead and collect fish there, except they don't allow you to take any bait that you collect and fish with those. In the Sandhills Lakes, because the Sandhills Lakes are very fragile, they're very pristine, and they don't want carp and things like that out there in those areas. In Nebraska also, it's very interesting. they were very concerned about fish diseases, septicemia, whirling disease, and things like that. So they basically took the eastern 2/3 of the state and said no one can go out and collect any bait fish anymore. Take them from the stream and fish them, or take them to another lake, or take them home, or anything like that. They later determined that they overstepped their bounds, that these diseases were not being transported as easily as they thought they were. So they kind of, they basically left the law in place that you still can't collect out there and take any fish away from a particular spot, but they no longer say it's to protect the aquatic communities from diseases. They had no record of any diseases being transported around, so that was really interesting. Nevada does not allow any bait fish collecting, small fish collecting. New York has some very strict regulations, you want to read about those. North Dakota is restricted too. In Ohio, you cannot go out with a fishing license and collect fish in Ohio. They only allow licensed bait dealers to sell fish and move fish around. Oregon is also prohibits any kind of live bait or collecting of small fish. South Dakota says you can only use bullheads, or if you gut a fish, then you can take the guts out of it and you can go take it wherever you want to fish with them. Isn't that crazy? And there's the other states, Utah, live bait is illegal, Washington, Wyoming. So that's what I learned, excuse me, that's what I learned about water, some things about water law, trespass, and where you can go, and what's legal and what's not, and where you can go in the United States to actually go out and try to collect some fish on your own. Anybody have any questions?
I go out and collect 150 fish.
Yeah.
That's my daily limit. I take them home. Is there an accumulated limit, like I can buy one fish in my house?
Tom said if my daily limit is 150 fish that I can collect with my fishing permit, and I take those home, can I go back out tomorrow and collect another 150? Is there any kind of limits on how many that I can take home? And according to the statutes I read, there is no limit. You can do that every day if you want.
Is there a law against reselling?
Tom said, is there a law that would keep him from selling the fish that he collected from native streams in Missouri? The answer is yes, because you have to apply for a bait dealer's license. And I don't know if in Missouri, in some states, they don't allow that. They don't allow someone to say that I'm collecting native fish, I can give me a bait dealer's license. They don't do that. In Missouri, I don't know if they do that. Probably not. It's a good question, though, because how many candidates are Jim?
How can I tell if a fish, like, say the flyer?
I'm sorry?
The flyer.
Yeah, flyer.
How would I figure out that it's legal for me to take it or use it?
Under the Missouri code, if it's not listed specifically, then it's considered free game.
No, we mean not listed.
Yeah, oh, okay, yeah, I shouldn't use the word listed, it's listed implies a danger. Yeah, if it does not specifically say in the language which fish you cannot take, then assume that you can. And usually most states aren't that way. Yes?
You want to talk about the crazy rules of crayfish these days?
I don't know. Crayfish? Is there some crazy rules for crayfish?
You can't find it anywhere because of translocating different populations.
honestly, I was not really aware of that. I think one of the things that they were really worried about was transportation or the translocation of rusty crayfish and some of these exotics, or invasives, I should say. And so I think that's, like in Missouri, that was a primary driver. We don't want rusty crayfish being transported all over the place.
It's such a big deal, though, all the bait shops over there. They also, I think, worry about stuff like, big creek, crayfish.
Thank you for that. I was not aware.
Yeah, I believe
Yeah,
they-
over here. Oh, go ahead.
I believe they, for that law that they made, I think the law requires that the fish have to, or the crayfish have to be native in the area they're selling or something. It basically just makes it impossible for fish dealers to, or bait dealers to handle them with any cost anymore. That's why I think it's why they disappeared. I don't know that they outlawed them, they just debated it so hard that nobody wants to deal with them anymore on some of it.
Okay,
Yeah.
sure. Legally in Missouri, there's one species of crayfish that you can't sell, and you can find places where you sell them, but they have to come from aquaculture sources. In other words, fish farms for the most part. And that species is the barrel crayfish. Barrel or other crayfish, that's the only one that's legal for trade while it's alive. We've got 3 others, including the barrels, that can be traded for eating, but not for use as bait. That's what law rules are in Missouri right now. You can't find them in the other program.
Yeah, I think the rules they made, I think just made it so hard that nobody just wants to deal with it.
Right. The problem you run into is the enforcement people that you deal with, they can't tell the crayfish apart. And so,
Same thing happens with some of the game fish, by the way, when the warden pulls you over fishing.
yeah.
If you ever caught, you know the difference between largemouth bass and, say, Kentucky or spotted bass? There's also hybrids of them, so how do you know which one? The limits on most lakes are different. So like Lake of the Ozarks, the spotted bass, a 12-inch limit, 6 per day overall for any black bass, and then largemouth, 15 inches. But if the game warden pulls you over, the only way they can physically tell the difference is to do a DNA test on them. That's the only way they can do it. So if you get pulled over, it's kind of this. The only reason I know this is I'm a fisherman as well, and that's actually happened where I got pulled over by the game warden. Checked that we're checking my fish. I had one that was right at 15 inches, but the problem was he couldn't tell if it was a spotted bass or a largemouth. So we determined as a group that it needed to go back into the lake. So, which is fine, you know, it's not that big a deal, but it was just kind of funny that I was like, so if somebody were to ask, how do you know? He goes, well, we're going to send it for a DNA test. He says, we won't do that, so.
In my new book, on Fishville, Missouri, I'm going to have illustrations in my piece that actually distinguishes spotted from smallmouth and hybrids. So you'll have that information with some nice illustrations and photographs.
We made a bunch of those hybrids ourselves.
I'm sure you did.
Thousands. But the average person can't tell them apart. Plus, on top of that, they can back cross the island parent, so it gets kind of.
Oh, yeah, once they back across,
They do.
yeah.
Usually it's pretty easy to tell the two species apart.
Right.
And every once in a while you get one that has the traits of both, you know, you're probably dealing with a hybrid, the problem is, which way does the law go then? Because they don't have a rule for hybrids on those, unlike they do for like some lakes will have for the hybrid bass, the striped bass and the white bass hybrid. Well, a lot of lakes have rules on those as a specific type of fish, but what do you do with other ones like, some of the like some fish don't usually cover the problem, they do other than hybrids and those.
You do most of those are not governed by bag regulations.
Correct.
So you don't have to really worry about that too much. So, yeah, that's a good dialogue there. Anybody have any other questions or comments? Okay, what I'd like to do, since I'm really not at the top of my game today, invite you back, and I've got about a 45-minute presentation on the Ohio University of Missouri fishes and sociography and why we have why we have the number of species that we have, and I'm glad to give that talk. If there's no other questions, I'm going to turn it back to Steve.
Thank you very much, Bob. We'll look at that for spring when we can connect it to a collecting trip.
Yeah.
You can take us on a good legal one. But basically, I'm going to summarize. We can get in the water at a legal point and then go anywhere as long as we stay in the water in Missouri.
Yep.
And 150 fish a day, I thought it was. I
Have a
don't know why I had
license.
it in my head that it was a lot lower. Yeah, the license, the Missouri fishing license is like something like $12.
It's cheap.
And you can get it almost instantly
Don't
online.
cost me anything.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations. Yeah, because it's because you're under 15, but some of us are older.
Over 65, yes, you do get some
You only
benefits.
got to pay for it between 15 and 65. All right. A lot of great
Paid for a lot
collecting
of
spots
years.
around here. A lot of great aquarium fish too. Thank you very much, Bob.
Yeah, so let's get a date for next spring, and I'll take you guys out, so do what we did last time.
We'll work on that. All right. Somebody else is supposed to be up here because you can't leave me with a live microphone. There's the man right there. He's like behind me.
We still have raffle tickets for sale for the Aqua Clear. Anybody wants to get any of them? Julia's selling them in the back there. Other than that, I guess we're ready for the auction.